Warning! This show contains material that some listeners may find troubling, including discussions of intense horror movie themes, explicit language, movie spoilers, and women speaking. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, horror fans. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Eleanor.
And welcome to Horror Sandbox, the podcast where we dig around in horror films and see what we can unearth.
That's right. Before we get started with today's movie, Charlie, how are you coping with the horrors?
So, I will acknowledge that by the time this episode is released, the Oscars will be a thing of the past by quite a few weeks. But I still want to talk about it. I think it's been pretty big in the horror community that Sinners, which is a fantastic movie, had 4 Oscar wins this year. Frankenstein had 3, and Weapons had 1 as well for Best Supporting Actress.
Yes.
Which was amazing. I specifically wanted to talk about it because this year, I was really excited because this meant a lot to me because I had kind of taken a step back from horror movies after the birth of my first daughter, because I think you understand, like, after your kid's born, your brain kind of shifts and goes through some weird stuff, and I just wasn't feeling horror at that time.
Yeah.
But then, shockingly, after the birth of my second daughter, I was going through a little bit of a rough period there, and I needed to grab onto something to kind of ground myself. And I was like, you know what? Let's go back to horror movies. And the first 2 I watched for the first time in like years were Sinners and Weapons. And I thought both of those movies were so good. And I was like, this is what I need. Like, these are the horror movies I've missed. Like, and it pulled me right back into it. And after that, that's when I called you and I was like, hey, I need something to channel my energy into. Let's start a podcast, which was an idea you had for years, just something that you hadn't acted on. So,
right.
Yeah. So I just think this year and the Oscars were like, it was just awesome to see 2 horror movies that meant a lot to me this year get awarded for it. So that was exciting.
That's beautiful. And I love that when you were ready to come back to horror, you started at some of the best movies that the horror genre had to offer.
Yes,
and
exactly.
You get to celebrate with them this year, which is fantastic.
It is fantastic. So yeah, I'm just excited for this little like resurgence in horror in culture and in my life. And I'm just, it's really cool.
Beautiful.
But how did you cope this week? What were you up to?
This is really small but super cute. My husband went on a business trip and he came back and he brought me this little, it's like a lotion bar, like a hand lotion bar that's solid, and it has little, almost like, I think they're actually beans of some sort, but so you can like use it to massage as well. And it's shaped like a little bug and it's so cute and it just made me so happy.
Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about. They are cute.
Yeah. It's anything for a little bit of whimsy in your life, right?
Agreed. Yes, that's so sweet. Okay, Eleanor, why don't you tell us what we're digging into today?
Absolutely. We watched Candyman, the 1992 version. This was written and directed by Bernard Rose, written by Clive Barker and Bernard Rose, and it's starring Virginia Madsen, Sandra Berkeley, and Tony Todd. The IMDb summary is, the Candyman, a murderous soul with a hook for a hand, is accidentally summoned to reality by a skeptic grad student researching the monster's myth. So, Charlie, I believe you have a fun Bloody Shovel Award for this one. What is it?
I do. I have Best Timeless Burn Makeup. I was really surprised because it's the fire scene at the end when she was burning. I was like, wow, she's like barely even on fire. Like, this looks like, I was like, she would be sustaining so many wounds right now and it's not showing it. But then after they put her out and they pull those blankets back and you see the makeup for a 1992 film, that's some solid burn makeup.
Pretty gnarly for sure.
It's absolutely gnarly. Very well done. Well, in a terrible way. But okay, what's yours? What's your Bloody Shovel?
Most cigarettes. This is the most cigarettes I think I've ever seen in any movie. There are so many cigarettes in this movie. It was jarring. And I think that's just a reflection of how the times have changed, because I don't know if you remember ever going into like a restaurant where there was a smoking section in a non-smoking section?
I do. I was very little when those existed, but I very specifically remember like a Perkins smoking section versus a non-smoking section.
Yeah, nothing like cigarettes and omelets, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, there were a lot of cigarettes in this movie.
I agree. It's quite a bit of cigarettes.
So we start with a credit scroll and an overhead shot of Chicago. And then there's a cut, and it cuts to bees and a creepy voiceover of basically a bad guy evil monologue. He's talking about shedding blood with his hook hand, and then the bees are all unleashed. And then we cut to a new scene. This is a soft filter close-up of our hero of the movie, Helen. She is smoking in a classroom while a student tells her a story about something that she swears happened for real life. And then we kind of see that story play out on the screen. We see a girl babysitting, and a dude pulls up on his motorcycle, and he's there to make out. And this is not actually her boyfriend, but it is a crush. This character's name is Billy. That is Ted Raimi from Evil Dead 2. And some elder millennials might remember him from Xena, the TV show from the 90s. He played Jockster. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that show.
And to be a little bit more millennial right now, he was also a voice actor in Invader Zim.
Oh, I didn't know that. Was he?
Yeah.
Do you know what character he was?
I forgot.
Oh, okay.
But he was definitely in it.
That's cool. Yeah.
So the babysitter, Clara, tells Billy a story about this urban legend called Candyman. And if you say his name 5 times while looking in the mirror, he will appear. I guess Billy finds this incredibly hot, and he starts groping Clara. They are standing in the bathroom looking in the mirror. And then he says Candyman 4 times. And then she tells him to get out of the bathroom, kind of implying that she'll come out in something sexy or something. And then she turns around and looks in the mirror and says Candyman 1 more time, and he appears and kills her. Now the student telling the story to Helen says that he also killed the baby, but that Billy got away, but his hair had turned white and that he went crazy from the incident. Helen walks into another classroom where her fellow grad student, this character's name is Bernadette or Bernie, she is finishing up with another student who's talking about the urban legend of the one where the babysitter does drugs or something and was asked to put a turkey in the oven, and she accidentally put the baby in the oven and the turkey's in the crib or something like that. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Do you remember that one?
No, I never heard that one before this movie. I've heard, like, obviously Candyman and, like, Lover's Lane and people getting killed with a hook, so all over the place, but not the turkey baby oven one.
Did you have one where if you said something in a mirror a certain amount of times, something bad would happen?
I did. So I had Candyman and Bloody Mary. We used both interchangeably as kids. Do you remember Bloody Mary?
I remember Bloody Mary, but mine was specifically, it was 3 times, not 5, and it was, you had to, in the dark, say, in usually a bathroom mirror, you had to say, Bloody Mary, where's your knife? 3 times, and she will appear.
We didn't do the where's your knife. And I specifically say we didn't do because when I was a small child, like I'm talking like middle school, I had a group of friends who we would all go to our one friend's house, and like her mom was just MIA, and we would all hang out, and we literally did, like, we would watch horror movies in the basement, and after that we would like lock each other in the bathroom with the lights off and not let each other out until we say Bloody Mary in the mirror 3 times. So we were really mean to each other, but we never did a knife.
Are these people still in your life?
No.
Okay. I was going to say, like, that sounds like the beginning of a lifelong friendship. Maybe we should lie to the listeners from now on and say that that's what we did together when we were kids.
Yes, this was our...
Just invent our backstory.
Had we known each other back then, it would have been, but
yes,
unfortunately we did not.
We'll roll with that.
Yeah.
All right, so we cut to an overhead shot of the University of Chicago. Helen walks into a classroom where someone is talking about the urban legend of the alligator in the sewer.
Did you see what was written on the chalkboard? Did you zoom into that at all?
I don't think so.
So I did, because I'm always curious, and it's bullet points of common urban legends, and like the bottom bullet point is has a hook, or like is a cover for societal whatever. So it's basically, if you read the board, giving you what Candyman's going to be. So
that's adorable.
Interesting.
I didn't notice that at all, but that's neat.
Yep.
Foreshadowing.
Yes, exactly.
So the professor talks about how these stories are basically just modern folklore, And then the class ends and Helen approaches him as he is flirting with a student whose name is Stacy. And this is, of course, very awkward because the professor, whose name is Trevor, is her husband, Helen's husband. So the students leave and she confronts Trevor because she's upset that he's doing the urban legends lecture this semester while she and Bernie are trying to gather data for their graduate thesis. So there's a little bit of conflict there.
I do wonder what he is a professor of. You think it's like English? Do they ever say?
Well, I don't remember. I assumed it was English or literature. It could be sociology, but it's got to be English or something like that.
Probably.
So we watch Helen transcribe her recorded interviews in an empty room. And a woman walks in to clean and she overhears the interviews. And she says that she actually knows the Candyman story and that he lives in the projects, specifically an area called the Cabrini Green apartments. She calls her friend Kitty into the room, who tells her a story about a woman named Ruthie Jean. She was brutally murdered with a hook at her apartment. She says she knows that it was Candyman who killed Ruthie Jean and that it was in the papers. So later, Helen is going through some old records at the library and she finds Ruthie Jean's story. And then we cut back to her apartment where Bernie and Helen are reviewing her findings over wine and roughly 1 industrial pallet of cigarettes.
So many cigarettes.
Yeah. They start talking about her apartment and some housing projects in the city, and then they talk about some redlining practices that the city had engaged in, which I thought it was good. Like for 1992, I thought it was good that they were kind of calling it out, even if they were just touching on it very briefly.
Yeah, like you said, it's very brief. And I think a lot of the like social constructs that they talk about in this movie are probably surface level or brief, but still, I think ahead of their time for 1992. Just, it was surprising for me to see in a movie from back.
Right. Right, because you're kind of ready to cringe at how insensitive or uninformed or whatever the characters may be. And there, I think there still is some of that in the movie, but it's not as bad as I was expecting, I guess.
I agree, yeah.
So Helen says that she figured out that her apartment building was originally going to be a housing project by the same people who built Cabrini Green. Bernie says she knows about that project area, the Cabrini Green area, and she avoids it because it's dangerous and someone was shot there just the day prior. Helen takes Bernie into her bathroom and shows her that her bathroom mirror can be removed and she can fully access the next apartment over.
Which, if you discovered that in an apartment that you were living in, do you think you'd be on the phone with your like housing management to get that filled up? Because I don't think I could sleep in an apartment where someone could just come in through my bathroom wall.
Yeah, and the next apartment over, because the way it's set up is if you remove your bathroom mirror cabinet thingy, you can just push out the cabinet for the bathroom for the next apartment, and then you can get through that hole. The apartment is supposedly empty, but still.
For real, and honestly, I feel like I would prefer it be filled with someone that I know and trust versus just empty.
Yeah.
Anyone could be breaking in and accessing my apartment. Not okay.
Yeah, but she says whoever killed Ruthie Jean must have smashed through the bathroom cabinet. Like, that's probably how they got in, is her theory of the case. And she's basically saying, my apartment happens to be laid out exactly like this victim's was, or at least that's what I'm assuming, so maybe we can look into this. They put the mirror back and they do a little, like, you don't really believe the folklore, do you? And they together say Candyman into the mirror 4 times, and then Helen says it alone the 5th time. Dun dun dun. So later that night, Helen is in bed and there's a spooky noise and a jump scare, but it's just her husband leaping into the bed like he's a spider monkey on cocaine. It's insane. It terrifies her, and he's I think it's also showing that he's drunk and she's pissed off, but other than that, I don't know what the scene was doing here.
No, I think it's a really dumb scene. I think it was just to give you a jump scare so that something happens right after she says Candyman. But like, obviously she's not gonna die this early in the movie. But yeah, it was, I agree, a very stupid scene.
I guess the other thing it could be doing is establishing that Trevor is an asshole and we should not like him.
I agree with that. He just gets drunk and does whatever he wants. And yeah. I agree.
So the next day, Helen and Bernie are driving to Cabrini Green, and we see that Helen packed pepper spray and a taser, which Bernie roasts her about and says, they're only going 8 blocks over. But also, Bernie, You're the one who said it was dangerous, and somebody just got shot here the other day. So which is it?
I agree. Like, better safe than sorry, right? Bring your pepper spray. It's probably not going to do much, but have it with you.
Yeah. Bernie also complains that the way Helen insisted that they dress makes them look like cops. And she's kind of giving her a hard time and saying, you need to think things through because the gangs are all over this neighborhood and all this other stuff. And then Helen finally blows up at her and is basically like, you need to think about the thesis. Like, that's the whole reason they're doing this. They're doing this grad thesis. So they need this research. They need to talk with the people who were involved, etc. Their thesis is about exploring how a mythical urban legend is actually getting blamed for real life horrors, which I think that would be a really cool thesis. Way cooler than mine.
I agree. I would go to school for that. Yeah, I think my thesis, is about high-speed rail. Boring.
Nerd.
I know. It was the worst. I hated it.
Mine was about voter policy and its impact to turnout in the state of Colorado.
Wait, okay, that's actually legit though. Mine was complete bullshit.
High-speed rail isn't bullshit, but I believe that you had to write a bullshit paper.
Oh, it was complete. It was 40 pages of just nothing. But I would kill to write a thesis about like urban legends or anything like that. That'd be super cool.
So they pull into the parking lot and there's a bunch of young black men who are catcalling them. And they're following them and ask them what the heck they're doing here. And I point out that they're black men because it's very obvious that this white woman dressed like a cop in a black neighborhood is supposed to be tense and unusual.
Right.
They are menacing, but also like she rolled up in their neighborhood dressed like a cop, as Bernie said. So ultimately, all these men do is yell up at the other residents that the cops are there. So they kind of like harass them a little bit from a distance and then yell warnings out to the rest of the residents, which honestly feels totally valid.
Yeah, like I think that's a normal response. If some stranger comes into your neighborhood, you're going to give everyone up there a heads up.
Yeah. There's graffiti everywhere. That's actually, some of it's actually kind of nicely done.
Yes. It's a stark contrast from the graffiti that we get to witness in As Above, So Below by Pap.
I know. He wishes he could graffiti this good.
He does.
Or he would if he didn't die. R.I.P. Pap. One of the graffiti images says "Sweets to the Sweet," which seems to be a nod at Candyman. And Helen is walking around taking pictures, and suddenly a door, one of the apartment doors, opens, and a dog barks at them before the owner can kind of bring the dog back in, and she slams the door. Kind of just a jump scare and establishing that they're kind of keeping an eye on these people wandering around taking pictures.
It's smart. I think it's showing that obviously it is a dangerous neighborhood. And obviously that woman owns that dog for protection. So she's kind of establishing like, hey, I have this big dog. Don't come in here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a don't mess with me kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So they find the murder apartment and it's wide open. So of course they go right in. The bathroom does indeed have the same layout as Helen's apartment. She opens the cabinet and can see straight into the other apartment. She crawls through with the camera and she takes pictures and kind of walks around the other apartment, which is in total disarray. There's a cool shot where Helen finds a giant hole in the wall and she kind of pokes her head through and starts taking photos, and the camera pans out and someone has painted this giant mural of a man screaming. So Helen is actually standing inside his wide open mouth. It's just a really, really cool scene.
Yeah, it's a really good shot. I don't know, like at first it just makes the graffiti like art, and it makes it creepy, and it's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, it's very creepy. But yeah, so she climbs through this hole and then she kind of takes in the mural, and then she also finds a pile of candy with razor blades in it. So it's obviously a reference to other urban legends, but it's not really addressed in the movie.
Yeah, it is. Like, it's weird. Like, obviously this guy's name's Candyman, but it's Candyman for another reason. He's not handing out candy to children. But I did want to make a note here that like that whole urban legend of razors and candy, it's not real. There's a few cases throughout history, but most of those cases ended up being hoaxes. And the ones where they weren't hoaxes, where people died, were actually like family members or someone did it to someone that they knew. There's that one death, I think it's called the Pixie Sticks killer, who it's a father who kills his own son by poisoning a pixie stick. So
on Halloween, right? That was the one.
I believe so.
And they tried to blame it on some monster who was giving poison to kids on Halloween.
Yes, but no, there really isn't any confirmed cases of monsters handing out razor blades and candy. Just like there's none where people are giving away their expensive drugs for free and pretending that they're candy.
I know. I know. I mean, people do dumb things and accidents happen and all that, but the Halloween one, poisoning Halloween candy or putting razor blades in it, that one I never really understood because it's your neighbors.
Right.
If there's only like so many houses you're going to go to on Halloween night with your kid, so the list of suspects is already pretty short.
That's so true. I never even thought of that. There's only like, what, 30, 40 suspects at a night on Halloween.
Right.
So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so it would just be several layers of stupid.
Yes, agreed.
So, okay, she's done kind of checking out the murder apartment, and they start to leave when that woman from earlier who had the dog confronts them. And Helen asks if they can talk to her, and she kind of concedes, and they follow her back to her apartment. And the woman says that whites are only ever there to cause problems. We should mention, the actor who plays Bernie is a black woman. When I was watching, I thought that the movie was trying to show that the residents inherently didn't trust her because of her association with this white woman and the fact that they're all dressed like cops. But they don't really dig into this at all, so I don't know if it's kind of they're just winking at something, but I thought it was interesting.
I know I was reading interviews and it is a deliberate casting choice to make Bernie black, but I'm not sure why and if they really gave that rhetoric the attention it deserved. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting point for sure.
But yeah, it might be, like I said, they might have just been kind of winking at it and not really wanting to dig too deep into it. So this woman asks if they are there to make them look bad. Basically, are you here to make everyone in this apartment complex look bad? And she holds her baby and she says that her name is Anne Marie. And then she asks if they want to know about what happened to Ruthie Jean. And she says that she heard her screaming and she called 911, but no one would help until it was way too late. And then she says that she's really scared of Candyman, especially because of her baby.
Which is a totally valid thought, because if a random woman got murdered one apartment down from mine and I was a single woman living right next door, I would be terrified of the murderer as well.
Yeah, I mean, that dog is huge and ferocious. There's only so much it can do, but if the cops are not there to help you, they're there to harass you,
yes.
Then yeah, I mean, that would be terrifying.
That would be terrifying to know that if the same thing happened to you and you were to try to call for help, that nobody would come. Ugh.
Yeah.
Not a good feeling.
Really helpless feeling. Horrible.
Yeah.
Later, Helen is at a dinner. She's with her husband and Bernie and then 2 other academics. And once again, about a metric ton of cigarettes. One of the academics, whose name is Purcell, starts talking about the Candyman legend. And he basically condescends to them about how he's already done all the work. And he's already written about it, and they're way behind. And I hate him. Thank you.
He is the worst. And I will say I was very distracted by his strange chin.
It's always a man with a strange chin, isn't it?
I swear. Yes, it is.
So yeah, this is kind of that cattiness in academia that I've heard about. He asks if they even know the story, and then he laughs in their faces when they say that they don't. And he does have a little bit of a point there. Like, if you're going to investigate all these urban legends and not kind of do the background research on where they came from, I feel like that's very early in your process that you should be addressing it.
That's true. I will say I think I kind of noticed, and I could be wrong, but I think Helen in this scene, she knows more than she's letting on. I think like that's the vibe or the look I get from her, where she's like, all right, I'll sit back and let you mansplain to me because you've done the research. So if I listen to you, that's that much less research I have to do. So thank you for helping. But she's not going to say that, because then he's not going to help.
You might be right. I could also see that being a case where she's like, yeah, I'm going to let him brag about his work so that I can poke holes in it later.
Yes. It's kind of like a reconnaissance mission, like just picking up what she can and just playing the dumb, ditzy female that didn't do her research to get more information. That's how I saw it, but I could just maybe like Helen or be giving her too much credit in this scene.
Perhaps. But he does tell the story of the background of Candyman. He says that the legend first appeared in the 1800s and that Candyman was the son of a formerly enslaved man who became an entrepreneur. And Candyman was very artistic and he was very good at portraits. He was commissioned by a wealthy man to paint his daughter's portrait. And of course, they fell in love and she got pregnant. The father paid men to lynch this man, and they sawed off his hand with a rusty blade. They smashed some nearby beehives and they smeared him in honey. He was stung to death by bees and then burned, and his ashes were scattered all over where Cabrini Green is now, which is awful.
Yeah, it's a really sad and horrific story.
Later, Helen goes back alone to Anne Marie's place, and there's a young boy whose name is Jake sitting outside, and he says that she is not home. Helen then decides that she should ask this child about the gruesome murder of Ruthie Jean, which, like, okay, no wonder these people hate white bitches.
Yeah, it's true. It seems like her motivations are coming from a good place, but I think this scene and what you just said is a good underlying like theme of the movie where like she clearly has no respect for the community or their cultures or their history, and yeah, it's just no wonder that she dies in the end.
So this kid says he actually can't help her because if he tries, then Candyman will get him. And she asks if he can show her where Candyman is. And then she says, unless you're too scared, which again, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, you're not working a source. You are exploiting a child, the fear of a child, which I think is pretty terrible.
You're exploiting a child in a very dangerous neighborhood, a child who knows the rules and was raised in this neighborhood, and you're making him like you're putting his literal life at risk by doing this. So
yeah, you're messing around in something that you have no context for, and you're like trying to get him to prove that he's brave for you so you can work on your grad thesis. It's just so out of touch.
I agree.
But he does. He leads her outside past a giant pile of wood and furniture, and he mentions that they're building a bonfire for the party, but he doesn't really go into it. They come to a public bathroom by the outdoor playground. Jake says that a boy got killed in there, and he thinks Candyman must be in there. He says that the kid's mom was in the store, and that the boy had to use the restroom, and he says people heard the boy scream, and somebody ran in only to run out seconds later, and their hair had turned white. Which, this is the second time somebody's hair turning white out of fear has come up, but it doesn't really come back. Like, they don't go back for a third time to have a character have their hair turn white or something.
They don't, and there are multiple characters throughout this movie that witness or see the death of someone who was killed by Candyman, and none of their hair turns white. So maybe, I mean, that could just be a reference to how urban legends work, you know, where things get extrapolated or whatever. But yeah, they just mention it twice and never again.
Yeah. So Jake says that whoever attacked the kid had basically given him a surprise penectomy, cut his penis off.
Yes.
And Jake says he would have been better off dead. And we have to talk about this.
Yes.
He says that the kid was murdered, and then later he says he was worse than murdered. So there's like conflicting stories of whether or not the child in question was actually murdered. And I kind of thought, at first I thought it was just sloppy, and then I was thinking maybe this is a nod to how different versions of like urban legends often contradict themselves.
Yeah, and just like the way stories travel through communities. And yeah, because it is true, because you would think, okay, well, maybe he did get it cut off and also died, but then he said he would have been better off dead, alluding to the fact that he isn't dead. So I agree. I think hopefully the writing wasn't that sloppy, and it was just, yeah, like this is the way legends are spread, and there's different versions.
Yeah, because I think later when they're talking about this case, they refer to it as a murder, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
So Helen decides to go into the bathroom with her camera. There's more graffiti, more references to sweets for the sweet, but this looks like it's written in fecal matter, which is a choice.
It's pretty gross. Yeah.
She looks in the stalls and she finds an arrow pointing to one particular toilet, and she opens it and it's full of bees. Which, I'll say, not the worst thing that could be in a toilet that looked like that.
That's so true.
So meanwhile, outside, a figure in a black leather jacket has appeared behind Jake, and Jake looks up at him and says, Candyman, kind of terrified. This man enters the bathroom and flashes a hook in his hand, and then 3 other men appear. They grab Helen, and the hook man says that she found Candyman. Like, good for her. And then he beats the crap out of her and leaves, and then Jake comes in to help.
Which, again, poor Jake putting his life at risk. Like, this poor kid.
I know. At the police lineup, we see that Helen's face has been absolutely pummeled. Half of her face is super swollen and her eye can't open. The makeup on this is done very, very well. It was hard to look at in a good way.
Yeah, I agree. I think the makeup in this movie in general is really, for the few scenes that they do it, is really well done, especially for 1992.
So she IDs the person that she believes attacked her. And then she's sitting there with a cop and, you guessed it, more cigarettes. And he says that all of Cabrini Green is locked down and they're sure that the guy she ID'd killed Ruthie Jean, and the kid, which again, they say he's dead, not just injured. The cop also says that now that they have her as a witness, they'll be able to put him away. Helen sees Jake in the hall and thanks him for saving her life, but he's upset that she told anyone because he thinks Candyman will get him now. She tells him that the real Candyman is just a man and he's locked up, and so Jake is visibly relieved, hoping that this is the end of that story. So we cut to, it seems like it's been at least a few days, and Helen's in her apartment. Trevor comes home. Helen greets him with a celebratory candlelit meal and is just very happy to see him. And it's a very just like a cute kind of Helen and Trevor at home scene. But it doesn't really seem to be establishing much of anything except that maybe time has moved on and she's doing better. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe she's doing better. She feels like she's making like way on her thesis or something. I don't know.
So a few days later, Helen is back at the university and she and Bernie talk about the disparity between how the police reacted to the murdered Black people and an injured white woman, which again, I think this is something I'm glad that the movie calls this out.
Yeah, no, I am glad the movie calls it out too. And I think it's telling that, okay, this movie was written in the 90s. And then now, and I think it was, 2021 when the new Candyman that Jordan Peele co-wrote on came out?
I think so.
Yeah, and still, like, this whole story and the way cops react is completely relevant. And I don't want to get into that Candyman movie because it could be another one that we could do later. But there is one line in that movie where one of the Black men in it literally says, "If only we didn't have to deal with issues like that anymore," which just shows that, like, times have not changed. At least not enough. Yeah.
So Bernie gives her a box of slides for an old-timey projector, and then she says that one of the photography department people had saved them after her camera was smashed in the attack. So basically they were able to save some of the film. They talk about how there's now new interest in her thesis and they're probably going to get published, and then they part ways in the parking garage. So now Helen is alone and distracted by trying to look through the slides, and we see a well-heeled set of feet and a long fur-lined jacket. So it's like a shot of just the feet and the bottom of the jacket. Helen's putting her things in her car, and she hears someone say her name in a deep voice, and she turns around and sees a man standing at the other end of the deck. He tells her that she needs to be his victim, and then he reveals his hook, the hook hand that is jammed into his bloody stump. She seems to be hypnotized, and she starts to see bees, and then he says that he must shed innocent blood. And from this point on, there's a total vibe shift in the movie.
Yes, it almost feels like two different movies entirely. It goes from kind of like corny horror slasher to psychological, is the Candyman real? Is she the murderer? Like, it's just so different. And I thought the second half of this movie is really well written, and it's kind of a mind fuck. It was good.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when we were talking about if we wanted to do this movie or not, I was sure I had seen this movie. And then upon watching it, I don't think I actually have. I think I remember this movie being on and maybe me watching a scene or two. But I don't think I had actually seen this movie until we did it for this show.
I could say the same. Like I said, we said Candyman in front of a mirror 5 times for whatever reasons when we were kids. So that had me believe that I had seen it. But I definitely, if I did see it, I have gotten rid of all memory of it because this was a first watch for me.
Yeah. So she wakes up on the floor of a bathroom and she's covered in blood that is not hers. She can hear Anne-Marie screaming her baby's name. Helen opens up the door and she finds that the dog from earlier has been beheaded and there's blood absolutely everywhere. She picks up a knife that's on the floor and she finds Anne-Marie standing over an empty, bloody crib. There is just a comic book amount of blood everywhere.
It is crazy, but at the same time, I think if you beheaded a vicious, like, Rottweiler, which I'm sure wasn't an easy feat, there probably would be a lot of blood.
Yeah. So Anne-Marie sees Helen standing there and holding a knife, and then she starts screaming, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" And she attacks her. She throws her to the floor and starts bashing her head, and then Helen hits her with a knife in the shoulder. And that wound proceeds to squirt just a jet stream of blood.
I wonder if that actually ever happens.
I guess if you...
squirting blood.
I don't know. Maybe she's storing, like, balloons in there. I don't know. So the cops barge in and Anne-Marie starts attacking them. They grab Helen and they take her outside, and there's like helicopters and spotlights are everywhere. So I guess because the cops were increasing their presence in that area after they arrested the person they thought was Candyman, maybe that's why they responded so quickly. But it's a very large presence. And then also for the listeners to get a little behind the scenes action. This is the part, like when I was watching this, I texted Charlotte, because I watched it first. I texted her, I was like, just so you know, the baby lives and is fine.
Which
because
I appreciate so much.
Yes, because this, I don't know that I could watch this scene and worry about the baby the whole time. I had to look it up. I was like, spoil this for myself really quick. And
it gave me peace of mind in this scene, and then the fire scene at the end. Knowing that the
Yes.
baby makes it out of the fire, I was like, oh, thank God. Like, because I would have been so much more tense watching that
Yes.
scene if I thought, because I'm not trying to watch a baby burn. Like, that's not,
Yeah, exactly.
That's not fun.
Nope,
Yeah.
not for us. Not for us. So later we see Helen in a police station, and there's a cop giving her instructions to undress herself from her bloody clothes, and Helen is sobbing. It then cuts to an interview room where after she's showered or whatever, and she's been changed into scrubs or pajamas or something, the detective from earlier comes in and tells her that she's under arrest. And then the detective says that she attacked Anne-Marie and says that she also must have kidnapped and or hurt the missing baby. And then they totally screw up her Miranda rights.
I'm glad you noticed that because it bothered me so. It like wasn't even close. Bothered me.
So she gets her phone call and she calls her apartment to talk to Trevor. It's 3 a.m, but he isn't answering it and it goes to voicemail. She is suspicious of his absence from their apartment because it's so late. She's placed in a cell where she sees a vision of the missing baby and a bunch of scary images of the Candyman perhaps coming to hurt the baby. Then later, Trevor and a lawyer arrive to pick her up, and there's a bunch of press waiting outside. They kind of cover her head to bring her out while the reporters are shouting at her. Helen and Trevor go back to their apartment, and they meet with a lawyer, and the lawyer goes over the details of her story again, and she says she's blacked out and she doesn't know what happened. Later, she's taking a bath, and Trevor comes to check on her, and he says he has to go to work, which bothers Helen. And then she confronts him on his 3 a.m. absence because she is suspicious.
Which she should be. I mean, if you're, like, I will say if my, like, husband was missing, like, I would be home. I would be home at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a weird thing.
Yeah, and I mean, the phone's right next to their bed, and these are, like, 90s phones, so they're really loud.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you could put them on vibrate. Or at least I don't think you could put a landline on vibrate. I don't know.
Yeah.
So she goes to the kitchen and she gets a nostalgic can of Budweiser and, of course, her ever-present cigarettes. She opens up her bag and finds that box of the film that was recovered, and she sets up her projector to look at them. There are images from when she and Bernie first went to the murder apartment, and one of those images is of her in front of a mirror. And as she looks closer, she can see the outline of the man from the parking garage. So she goes to her bathroom and opens the mirror cabinets, and all of a sudden, Candyman's hook comes screaming out of the cabinet and tries to get her. She
should have closed that up. Should have put some bricks there.
Call maintenance. This is a problem.
Yes.
She flees the apartment and he is waiting for her in the hall. So she turns around, goes back into the apartment, and tries to call someone and gets a knife. But he appears behind her and says that she needs to come to him or the child will die in her place. And he also says that her disbelief is what's causing his congregation to be killed off. So basically, he needs people to believe in him in order to kind of continue to exist. And he said that if he kills her, she will be the new urban legend that's going to scare children.
Yeah, which is interesting because I think this is similar to Mr. Boogie and Sinister, where they need someone to believe in them, and the way Mr. Boogie does it is by being preserved in art. And I guess technically this is through art too, but through word of mouth and story, not through physical art. So
yeah, the legend must be kept alive kind of a thing. So he grabs her head with his hook right as Bernie arrives at the apartment. This is a little thing, but she's wearing one of like those very 90s like bucket hats with the front of it kind of flipped up. Yes. I think it's velvet. It's so it's so 90s.
There's so many times in this movie where I like the outfits are just so 90s. Like the first time they go to Cabrini Green, some of those like jackets that they're wearing, I was like, oh, those colors.
Yeah.
brought me back to my childhood.
For real. So Helen tries to warn Bernie off, like scream a warning out, but she comes in and Candyman kills her right away. So Trevor comes home to find Helen covered in blood. She passes out and then comes to cuffed, and a cop is sitting with her. So she leaps up and goes to find Trevor, only to walk in on the cops processing Bernie's body. And then we cut to her on a hospital bed later, and she's being taken to a room where she's strapped down in her bloody clothes. And Candyman appears, and he floats over her like a sleep paralysis demon, and he asks her for a kiss. And then she screams, and he vanishes under the bed while medical staff rush in and give her sedatives. And I thought this scene was very creepy.
I agree. It was super creepy. And I think like that whole being tied down and helpless. But I thought, you know what else I liked about this scene is it's so obvious that the Candyman, he's hooked up to like ropes or whatever and they're moving around. But I still like, it becomes such a staple of Candyman, so much so that in the new 2021 make, they make him float kind of like that. And it's just, I don't know. You think it would be corny, but somehow it works.
I think another reason this works really well as far as like the creepiness of it is he is very tall. Candyman
So
is a
tall.
very tall man.
Yes.
And watching a giant man float over a gurney like that, and then watching him hide himself, like disappear under the bed, it's very well done. And I think the contradiction between, or the contrast I should say, between a giant man and someone who's able to like nimbly kind of duck and hide and conceal himself, that is very scary.
I agree. Now that you say it, that like weird, like knowing he could hide under the bed, but he's still this huge presence is, yeah, that is, I agree.
Yeah. So we cut to a brief scene back at the projects where the baby is just kind of chilling out in a makeshift bed and the Candyman is kind of hovering near him. Later, Helen wakes up. She is strapped to the medical bed and staff are waking her up and strapping her into a wheelchair. They take her to the doctor's office and she learns that she's been in that mental hospital for a whole month and that she's been charged with first-degree murder for killing Bernie.
Yeah, it's that whole scene and like being there for a whole month. I like this psychological aspect of, am I the killer? Is Candyman even real? What's happening to me? I think it's a little ahead of his time, like that psychological like twist on a movie. So she doesn't know if she's a killer or not at this point. She's questioning her own sanity.
Yes. So she tells the doctor, I didn't kill Bernie. I can prove it. You need to let me summon Candyman. And then she looks in a mirror that's nearby and says Candyman 5 times. And nothing happens for a few seconds. And then the doc starts spewing blood because Candyman got him. And he pops up from behind the dying doctor and tells Helen that she's his and that his congregation will see a new miracle tonight. He then busts her out of her restraints, and then he just vampires out of the window, breaking it. She escapes as alarms are going off and the staff is running around. She goes out the window and like walks on the ledge around the building until she finds a room with a nurse in it, and she just pounds on the window. So the nurse, of course, lets her in, and Helen knocks her unconscious and then strips her down so she can wear her uniform. Helen makes her escape and heads home looking for Trevor. The apartment is being repainted in a jarring pink.
It's really gross pink, yeah.
Yeah, it's being painted by the student from earlier. She's terrified when she sees Helen. She says she needs to leave. And then Trevor comes in, and it's clear that they're both terrified of her. And Trevor says that they should call the hospital, and then she dares them to before she starts breaking down about not being a murderer. She tells Trevor that it's over, and she leaves.
This whole scene is kind of crazy. I had so many thoughts. One of them was, well, okay, it's obvious that Trevor, 1, shouldn't be sleeping with his students, and 2, was having an affair because he moved on rather quickly. However, he believes his wife of however many years has now, like, murdered multiple people, including a baby. So, in Trevor's head, it's probably over already. So I give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt there. However, this was also incredibly satisfying from the perspective of Helen, like just knowing that your presence could scare someone that much.
Yeah.
Like that's gotta feel kind of good.
Yeah. I'll get you. So she goes back to the murder apartment and she finds it covered in candles. There's a chain hanging from the ceiling and it has hooks attached to it. So she takes one. She climbs up another floor and she finds more murals. This one is depicting what happened to Candyman in the 1800s, including images of his death and of the girl that he was in love with. Helen sees Candyman in the apartment, and he is lying on a stone table asleep. She strikes him with the hook before he rips it out. He tells her to surrender to him, and he will spare the baby. She lets him carry her to the stone table, and he basically offers to take her with him to immortality. And then suddenly she is covered in bees. He opens his jacket to reveal a really disgusting half-rotten corpse and a bunch more bees. And then he kisses her with his bee mouth, and she seems to die. Candyman takes the baby, and Helen wakes up. She's alone but alive, and she finds writing on the wall that says, "It was always you, Helen." And that's when she notices that the girl in the mural looks just like her, which seems to be a trope in, like, it immediately made me think of the movie Dracula, the one with Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves.
I don't think I've seen that one, but I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, in that one, the vampire's wife looked just like Winona Ryder's character.
Right. Yeah, it's like a timeless story of love through eternity and multiple lives. This, I mean, at its core, and I'll talk about this more later, but Tony Todd talks about this too. This movie is a gothic romance. So if you take away like the scene and the setting and Chicago and all that, the story itself is about love and a gothic, like, messed up love. But I will say, if you really want to bring your internal love back to you, maybe you shouldn't frame her by having her behead a dog, stealing a baby, and murdering your best friend. I just, like, it's not, I don't think that's the way I would woo my eternal lover back into eternity with me. But yeah.
Well, that's because you're not a gothic murder boyfriend.
But
if you were, you might be thinking about this in terms of, I'm going to take everything else she has so that she has nothing left but me.
So toxic abusive relationship. Perfect.
Yes.
Eternity
Yes.
of that. Sounds like a thrill.
Yep. Sign me up. So Helen leaves, and she can hear the baby crying from the bonfire pile. And Jake hears a commotion from his room, and he heads down along with a few other kids, and they've got, like, fuel and torches with them. Helen is crawling in the pile of woods while the boys outside light the fire because they believe they heard the commotion, and they think that they're killing Candyman. Meanwhile, Helen finds the baby and picks him up just as Candyman snatches her and tells her they're already dead. She picks up a burning wooden stake and stabs him in the heart. She fights through the flames, and she drags the baby with her and emerges half burnt from the fire. She is nearly burned to death, but the baby is safe. Candyman engulfs in flames as sparks are flying, and then Helen collapses as Jake looks into the flames and sees Candyman's burning corpse.
Yeah, and this is my Bloody Shovel Award, where just the makeup here is really well done. Because as I was watching her crawl through the fire and her back was burning and then her hair started burning, my thought was, like, this woman would be destroyed right now. There's no way. But then after they put her out and, like, her hair's all charred and her scalp's all messed up, and at first you don't know that she's gonna die, but I did have the thought that, like, no way you can survive that level of burning. So it went from me being like, this is ridiculous, to, oh wait, no, this is actually really well done. So
yeah, it's pretty gruesome.
It's very gruesome.
So we get a shot of Helen's funeral as she's being interred. Her husband and his new girlfriend are there as her casket is lowered into the ground. And then suddenly there's this really long, like, parade of all the residents from Cabrini Green there to pay their respects. Jake is there, and he slowly removes Candyman's hook from his jacket and he tosses it into the grave. Later, we're back at the apartment, and Trevor is in the bathroom while his girlfriend is, like, checking on him. She offers to make dinner, but he's just not into it. He's very sad, and he's sitting there kind of just remembering all the good times he had with Helen. Then he goes to, like, cry in the mirror, and he says Helen's name 5 times as he turns off the light. And then suddenly, Helen's crispy ghost appears, and she Candymans his ass with the hook. And his girlfriend comes in hearing the commotion, and she finds his gutted corpse. And then we cut to a brand new mural in the projects, and this one is of Helen and the flames. End of movie.
Yes. Good movie. Good movie. Are you ready for me to get into my part?
Yes, I'm dying to know what you dug up.
So the director of this was Bernard Rose, who is actually a white man from Britain, which I didn't expect him. I could see him being a white man. I did not expect him to be from overseas. That was surprising to me. And he wrote the Candyman story based off a short story by Clive Barker called The Forbidden. So it's the original story. It was focused on themes of class systems, but it was over in Britain and Liverpool, and it didn't include themes of race. So this director, Bernard Rose, he took the film and he said it was kind of an accident that they ended up filming it in Chicago. They said that going to Chicago was kind of a random thing. He said, I went there to scout and take a look around. The stuff I saw and experienced in Chicago, the social deprivation, it was genuinely shocking. Obviously, a lot of things from the film came from a real place and from what happened there, and it added a whole other aspect to the story, which had a whole other element to it, which was the racial element, which I think makes it a much bigger film. So at first, the racial element wasn't really there, but when he decided to shoot it in Chicago and then went and filmed it in Chicago, that's when he added the race element to it after seeing the projects there. And I did want to note that Cabrini Green, it's a real place, and it's near the north side of Chicago, and they filmed 3 days of Candyman at Cabrini Green.
Wow.
Yeah. The other days they were spent in Hollywood at a soundstage. But this is interesting. I watched a lot of interviews with Tony Todd, who is the actor that played Candyman. And he recently passed away, which R.I.P. Tony Todd. But he states that while they were filming in Cabrini Green, there were 5 active gangs there, and they had to pay off some of the gang members to allow them to film there.
Oh, that's funny.
They also went in with cops. Like, they were undercover cops, but they were all armed. And it says the Illinois Film Commission wouldn't go in there without an armed escort of police officers. Their frightened approach only proved how fear of the streets operated institutionally. So this is coming from Rose, the director. He specifically says, we're scared of poor people. And he said he was unimpressed by their lack of sensitivity. And this is interesting because the director, Rose, he went back there without the police. And he says when he did that, he got to talk to a young woman. And he said the way that she talked was completely different than the way that they were talked to when they went in there with the police escorts. So I think that's interesting because there's a scene just like that in the movie where Helen goes alone and talks to Anne-Marie. And she kind of is like willing to speak with her and stuff because she's not, she's just coming in there a little more humbly. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, that's the thing. Like, there are communities who know that when a cop shows up, he probably isn't there to help. And that is a terrifying experience. I can't. Ugh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So to see someone coming in without a cop and just like talking to you as a person, because these are just people that are, villainized or whatever because of where they live, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. And there are no other choices.
Yeah. That's
because of redlining and because of all those issues. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Another interesting thing to point out here while we're talking about it. So I mentioned that there were 5 active gangs in Cabrini Green while they were filming there. Tony Todd states that in those first 30 minutes of the movie where they're filming, I think it's a scene where those men are catcalling Helen and Bernie. Those are real gang members. So they filmed, some of the gang members did choose to be part of this and film with them. So I thought that was
That's funny.
Yeah.
Like, if we have to pay you off, you guys want to be extras too? We can get your names in the credits.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. But yeah, so all of this, it leads us to what Rose states is the point of the movie. And he said it's not about a white savior going into the projects and rescuing Black people. It's not about that. It's about a woman going into an area, disrespecting their traditions and culture, and then ultimately making things worse. So he said, yes, it's filmed from the perspective of Helen, so you see it a little differently. But in the movie, she's not the savior. She does, in fact, make things worse. So
yes.
And he says a lot of the sequels got it wrong. He doesn't have much to say about the sequels, except for the one that Nia DaCosta and Jordan Peele made in 2021. He does like that because it has some of the same themes throughout it. But yeah, it's just cool. And one thing I want to note here, I'm not going to get too much more into the social commentary on this because I don't know that I have the right, background to speak on it too much. But I watched a lot of interviews with Tony Todd, and he said he had a lot of praise for this film, even though it has obvious flaws. And I just want to read what he said in that. And I think it puts a nice little bow on it. He said, "This was a film that had intelligence. It had a social commentary. Bernard Rose was one of the most intelligent directors I've ever worked with. I'm not going to make any excuses for his lack of depth or racial comparisons, but I know the man's heart and I know that man fought." And then, okay, this is me talking. This is an interesting little tidbit about what he had to go through to film this movie. Okay, back to Tony Todd's quote. He fought with the NAACP, who were worried he was going to depict an African-American man in a bad light. But in the end, it was a horror film, and I think we won that battle over the test of time. I think films like Get Out and Candyman are different films that have different scares for different sets of people. You know, it's all relative based on your own personal experiences. I think films that bring up racial disparities are good things for discussions. However, if you remove the history of Candyman and the story behind him, it becomes clear he had one true goal no matter what: to reclaim his lost love. So I think that's just like a good little summary of like, yes, this movie, it does talk a lot about race differences, about different housing issues. There's a lot to it that has been studied throughout the years. But also, there's more to this movie, which is the gothic romance that I mentioned previously between Helen and Candyman.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of layers. I find it really fascinating that he fought with the NAACP.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I can see why they might be concerned that someone's making a horror movie where the monster is a black man.
Yes.
That's valid. But I see his point too, that this is a horror movie and it's a story.
That's what Tony Todd, he's like, this is a horror movie. like
Yeah.
And black man, that's just something that you're saying we can't do because of fear or whatever. It's just another thing that you're saying isn't possible. And so that's not okay. I'm allowed to play a horror, like a villain in a horror movie.
Yeah.
Period. So
yeah.
it's just another like excuse to stop opportunities for strong, powerful, you know, potential acting options for people of different races. So
yeah.
Because if you think about it, a white man as Candyman would have made no sense in this setting.
Right,
It just simply would not have worked. And Rose says that as well. So, yeah, it fits. And I guess before I hop into Candyman's design, there's one other thing. There's a quote from Rose that I want to hit on that says, "There's a fear of the Candyman, which is irrational, but there's also a fear of the bourgeoisie of the projects, which is equally irrational and is at its heart, you know, an excellent demonstration of racism. And I think that's where this film got its power from." So just that's where I'll end it on the racism piece of this film. And then I want to talk about the design of Candyman and a little bit more of the gothic, like monster and love story part of it. Okay. Before I get into the Candyman design, I do want to make a note that there is a real Candyman killer in history. Now, the movie, it's not based off of this killer at all, but I just thought this was interesting, and you can't talk about Candyman without talking about the Candyman serial killer. But it was a man named Dean Corll. He was a serial killer who murdered 29 teenage boys, so a kind of prevalent one.
Oh my God.
Yeah, between 1970 and 1973.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot in a very short amount of time. And I'm not going to get into it very much because there's a lot to it. It would be a whole nother thing. And it's not really relevant to the movie, just a little tidbit. But the reason he was called the Candyman murder was because he worked in a candy shop and was known to give candy out to people. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's why he's the Candyman killer. However, that has nothing to do with this movie. So back to the Candyman. The director, Rose, says that he liked the central concept, that the idea that there's a monster who relies on people's fear and the belief in him in order to exist. And if we were to stop fearing or believing in him, he would cease to exist. So that goes back to that urban legend piece we were talking about earlier. And I think this is a common theme throughout a lot of horror movies. But we see it specifically in the ones that we've talked about in Sinister, where it's the same for Mr. Boogie or Bagul, that if you're not believed or if he's not recorded in some way, he doesn't exist.
Kind of like Tinkerbell.
That's true. Aw, poor Tinkerbell. But, okay. So, and then Tony Todd. So he actually, the actor who played Candyman, developed a huge amount of Candyman. He came up with a backstory and created most of the design for him as well. So Tony Todd specifically wanted to play someone who is similar to the Phantom of the Opera and a primeval boogeyman, but he wanted to do it without overacting it. So that's how he came up with Candyman, and he wanted him to be like a gothic elegance, and he wanted it to be rooted in a cause. So because he wanted Candyman to be rooted in a cause, he came up with that entire backstory about a black man falling in love with a white woman and being lynched for it. Like, that was all Tony Todd's idea, which I think is pretty cool. And the reason they came up with the hook was to show that Candyman was a supernatural being. Because if you look at his design, he's just a well-dressed man that floats. They had to give him something gruesome. So they came up with a hook, and it's funny because it was almost an eye patch. Tony Todd suggested it be an eye patch, but the person who designed it with him, Bob Keane, said, no, we're going to do a hook, and made a hook.
Well, and the hook is, prevalent in other very famous urban legends. So I think that was a good choice.
I agree. Specifically romance ones, too. What is like the Lover Lane urban legends?
Right, the hook is still in the car, yeah.
Yeah, that one, so... Yeah, I think it was a good design choice, too. And, I mean, eye patch, you could be alive and have an eye patch. That's not
right. And I do think that gothic elegance and, like, the Phantom of the Opera kind of vibe, I think that comes across with him because he's very well-dressed, and he's good looking. Like, if you just saw him, you didn't know about the hook and, like, the whole corpse and bees thing, you would think that's a handsome guy.
Yes.
So that elegance does kind of translate. Like,
I agree.
They did what they were going for.
And so speaking of the elegance specifically, that's a really good segue into my next part here, where to pull out some of that elegance and the romance side of it, both Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen, who plays Helen, they did things to like build their chemistry. So they took ballroom dancing lessons together.
I thought you were gonna tell me that they I was like,
no,
wait, that doesn't sound ethical at all.
Man, no. Okay, back to it. They took ballroom dancing.
Okay.
And
somebody's balls were dancing.
Shut up.
Sorry.
Oh, that's so good. That's so funny. No. Oh, man. Anyway.
So dancing and fencing.
And then he just said other romantic arts classes. So maybe. I don't know what else they did, but those were the things. And then one other thing to kind of pull away from the horror movie trope of the time of like excessive screaming. That's where they came up with the idea that Candyman could put Helen into a trance. So that was a tool that they utilized to eliminate like that kind of corny screaming and to make it more elegant and a little less tropey.
Well, yeah, and like the whole thing with fear is, fight, flight,
yes,
or freeze or whatever. Like all of those things can happen. But yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And I think there's a new one now. It's like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which is kind of we talk about fawn in another episode we do too, but that just kind of like giving in or the freezing and surrendering it fits. Yep. There is one thing, speaking about Todd and Madsen's romance, which I think is interesting and calls back to Rose having to fight the NAACP on having Todd be the villain of this movie. So there's a scene at the very end where Candyman and Helen are back together, and it's like with the bees when she goes back to the apartment. And originally there was a 2-minute scene where they're spinning together kind of in like this whirlwind on a clear like turntable thing. And it's supposed to be, I believe they were supposed to kiss there, and it's supposed to be like a 2-minute romance scene where they're being spun together in like a loving embrace. And they chose to cut that scene out because the producers were worried about how an interracial romance would be received. Isn't that wild?
Man.
Isn't that terrible? Yes.
It is. It is terrible.
But yeah, in an interview with Todd, he calls it out specifically, and he says, quote for quote, "The producers weren't afraid of a 6-foot-tall black man covered in bees, but they were afraid of an interracial kiss." And it's just like... Ugh.
Like, I said he was handsome. He does have a beautiful mouth. So part of me can understand that they were intimidated, but oh my gosh.
I agree. He is very handsome in this movie. But yeah, just a wild little bit that they, of all the things, that's what they choose to cut. But speaking of the bees, I want to end on the note of the bees. Todd mentions that the bees had a bigger trailer than he did.
What?
the film, it used more than 200,000 real honeybees. And most of the crew had to wear bodysuits to protect them from the stings. And I think this is funny. Todd had a fear of bees. He did not want to work with them, and he negotiated. He negotiated with the producers that he would get $1,000 bonus for each time he was stung by a bee.
Good for him.
Yeah, said he was stung a total of 23 times, so he received money for that. And then, so I think the time that we see the bees the most is in the climax of the movie, like we talked about, where the Candyman like spews 500 bees into Helen's face, and there were bees actually put in his mouth. Yeah, isn't that gross?
Oh my god, I am unwell.
I know, it's so gross. But to make sure he didn't like get stung in the mouth, they used a protective mouthpiece. And then I guess the person in charge of the bees, his last name was Gary, he used freshly hatched, non-stinging, non-flying bees in that scene. And they had to, specifically because Virginia Madsen was very allergic to bee stings.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't
What?
that crazy? Yeah.
That's insane.
So they casted someone who is allergic to bee stings and afraid of bees to do these roles, which is wild. And
they could do anything after that, I imagine. They had to have felt unstoppable after that.
Yes, for sure. Well, okay, are you ready for the best part of that scene?
Yes.
It took a half an hour for all of those bees to get out of Todd's mouth and into Madsen's.
No.
Yes.
You are describing hell.
Literally, Dante's, this should be one of the circles. It might be one of the circles. I'm not sure.
It has to be. This is I don't know what. When I watched that scene, it seemed like, well, obviously it goes very fast, but also I just assumed it was some type of special effects.
Nope.
No real
bees.
Not for 1 second did I think a real bee was in anybody's mouth.
Yep. Real traced out bees.
I need to pause so I can go scrum it for a few minutes.
This
is insane.
I know. Could you imagine? Now they did like.
I am imagining it. That's why I need to go scrum it.
Man, it is crazy. And it's like the person, there's literally a bee taker in charge of all these bees, and they used, I guess, queen bee pheromones to like chill the bees out, but obviously not enough. They were still getting stung. But yeah, I watched an interview with Todd where he recalls like filming that scene, and he says he's just like totally tranced out during all of it. And the beekeeper, he said, like, while you're there looking at the bees, he said assign them names and like personalities and just be like, that one's Tracy and that one's Ed, and like, and he said it worked. He was like, as he was like looking at the bees like falling out of his mouth and flying around him, like he gave them names and like humanized them, and it helped him get through that scene. So
oh my god, I have to watch that scene again.
Yeah.
Okay, well, all right. Which do you think is scarier? Having to be the film crew in Candyman and worrying about bees everywhere, or having to be the film crew in The Ritual and worried about the bears and hoping that the snipers get them in time if they go for you?
I think realistically, like if I'm in both those situations, the bees are going to bother me more because there's so many of them. And there's really nothing you can do to stop a bee from stinging you. And then the other thing too is you have to suppress that primal instinct to swat them away and or like smush them or kill them. And I would be so afraid of like stepping on one. It's the bees for me. It's the bees.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah, because the bear, you got the sniper. You just got to shoot the bear. Like, and I can outrun somebody else in the cast. I can get away from the
And
bear.
The other key thing I think about this is bears are not known to swarm.
Right. And like, yeah, it's just one entity versus like if a whole thing of bees decides like, oh, we're going to sting you, there's nothing you can do. Okay.
So would you rather fight 1,000 bee-sized bears or
Oh my God.
one bear-sized bee?
Oh, what a question. I think, you know what? I'm going to go with the bear-sized bee because I just have to avoid its stinger. Unless, do bear-sized bees, do bees bite? I don't know.
Well, it would fly too.
Shoot, you're right.
Yeah.
Also like a big dragon bee. I don't know. What about you?
The only thing I know in this moment is that I think I'm having nightmares tonight.
Yes. Oh, yes. About bees. Oh, gosh. All right. Well, on that absolutely absurd note, let's talk about what is this movie? Is it horror? Is it sad? Or is it something else?
Definitely horror.
Yeah. I agree. I think this one's a pretty cut and dry horror. It starts with your like slasher trope, ends with your psychological murderer trope, but definitely a horror, I think.
Also, I kind of love that Helen gets her revenge on Trevor because he sucked.
Yeah. Oh, he does suck. Again, like I give him the benefit of the doubt, like for moving on after your wife has murdered multiple people. However, not with the student that you were having an affair with. Yeah, he sucks there.
Yeah, and he sucked early on.
Yeah.
I hope she got Purcell next. That's what's gonna happen in my head canon.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, a good movie. A huge surprise, I think. So, all right. I think that's all for us. Do you have anything else for us today?
Nope, I think we're done digging around.
All right. Well, listeners, may the horrors persist.
But don't repeat it 5 times in the mirror. Thanks for listening to Horror Sandbox. For show notes, credits, and contact information, check out our website at www.horrorsandbox.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Horror Sandbox. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with all the horror fans in your life.
What's that?